Welcome back. I'm moving on to our first segment for today, talking about the U.S.-Africa Summit taking place in Washington, D.C. with the participation of President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. Actually, the president was very keen to meet with many of the U.S. top officials, many different meetings with Republicans and Democratic, discussing many different files and challenges facing Africa. Over the phone, we have Ambassador Hussein Haridy. Hello. Hello? Hello? So actually, would be joined now Ambassador Hussein Haridy, who will tell us more about the importance of this summit, especially that we know that this summit is taking place in a critical period of time. Actually, we have many challenges facing the whole world, whether we are talking about economic challenges, political challenges, many different issues. Hello? So we are waiting for Ambassador Hussein Haridy, and still he will tell us more about the importance of this summit. President Sisi actually held many meetings and discussed many important files, open files actually, on top of which it was also talking about the Renaissance Dam and how we need a legal binding agreement to guarantee talking about the operating and filling of the dam without any harms to any of the African countries. So I think Ambassador Hussein Haridy is back. Hello?
Hello, madam.
Good morning, Mr. Ambassador.
Good morning, madam.
So talking about the U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit taking place in Washington, D.C., and we were talking about how important it is, especially it is taking time now in really a critical period of time. We have many challenges facing the whole world, economic, political, and more. So how do you see the timing now?
Well, I guess it's this new framework of the strategic partnership between the United States and Africa, whether bilaterally or with the African Union. I guess it's a major international development in terms, of course, of American-African relations and in terms of its impact on international politics. Today, Washington time, there will be a summit meeting between U.S. President Joe Biden and the African leaders gathered in the American capital. And in this important session, I guess the two sides would agree on the way forward, how to strengthen and deepen the partnership between the United States and African countries in various fields like climate change, public health, security, combating terrorism, education, women empowerment, agro-business, civil society, good governance, democracy, human rights. So I would say that this framework, as it stands today, is really quite comprehensive. And if it's implemented according to the interests of both Africans and the Americans, I guess it would contribute to the well-being and prosperity in Africa. Today, the meeting today, the summit meeting today between President Biden and the African leaders, including Egypt's President el-Sisi, would discuss a very seminal topic and program, African program, which is how the United States could help Africa in implementing the ambitious agenda 2063, which is it's a program, it's an African-sponsored, African-owned economic development program that extends till 2063. So to conclude, I guess if implemented, and the United States would, for the first time, appoint a special representative, Ambassador Johnny Carson, an American career diplomat, who would be in charge of the implementation of the agreement that would be reached during this the United States African Leaders Summit taking place in Washington.
Mr. Ambassador, as we were talking now, we are talking about really a challenging time in the whole world. We are talking about economic challenges, political challenges, food actually challenges as well, many different files. We are just moving on from the repercussions of the COVID, moving on to the Ukrainian-Russian war. So if I'm talking now about the unity of the whole world to confront such repercussions, if I'm talking about this important summit taking place with African leaders along with the United States, how do you see the plans to be adopted to confront all these challenges facing the whole world now?
Well, I'll limit my answer to the American-African partnership. There have been some American initiatives already to help African countries in terms of assuring and ensuring their food security. There is another initiative called Power Africa, and a third one called Prosper Africa, which has aimed at encouraging trade, investment, and economic development. What's taking place in Washington these days during the summit is to put all these initiatives in one framework, and the United States administration announced 2 days ago that it would earmark 55 billion US dollars to finance various assistance programs to Africa in various fields. And this money would be disbursed during the coming 3 years. So you have touched on one of the negative consequences, the negative impact of the war in Ukraine, and which is the food security. African countries, some African countries have suffered from the insecurity related to the food supply, the grain supply, and the prices of grains in light of this war. So one of the elements of the partnership between the United States and African countries is how to empower the Africans to ensure their food security and to develop agriculture, so that in the future there will be a great degree of sustainability in food production in Africa. In another field, which of course is of great interest to African countries, is cooperation between the two sides in public health. And when we public health, of course, this refers to pandemics, to how to help African countries meet COVID-19, to assist and aid Africa in having, in manufacturing its own vaccines So I guess we should expect good results out of the summit. And of course, it all depends finally on implementation. And it seems to me that the American administration is serious in making sure that whatever projects would be agreed upon, whatever agreements would be signed, there will be an implementation mechanism to make sure that really these projects and these initiatives and these agreements would be implemented. And as I said earlier, the United States would designate a special representative for the implementation of these projects and agreements, Ambassador Johnny Carson.
So how do you see also the importance of the meetings held within the framework of this summit? I mean, also President El-Sisi was very keen to meet with the Democratic parties, with the Republican parties, and being keen to meet with all of the top officials discussing all the files related to Africa.
Well, these multilateral meetings, these summits are usually a good occasion for the heads of delegations taking part in these meetings and summits to hold bilateral meetings, whether with the host country or with other leaders with whom Egypt has good relations. So in this context, the president met with some representatives from the United States Congress, and I guess that it's scheduled that he would meet with some American businessmen. And of course, these meetings do give the Egyptian president a chance to elaborate on Egyptian points of views concerning whether the domestic situation in Egypt, which has always been uppermost on the minds of the American lawmakers in Washington,
right,
and to discuss some regional issues, and I guess maybe the question of the Renaissance dam in Ethiopia,
right,
would come up.
Mr. Ambassador Hussein Haridy, thank you very much. Always a pleasure having you with us on the Breakfast Show. And right now, moving on to a quick break, then we'll be back with more on our show.